In the absence of a gavel, I'm using my hand. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we would start with a salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Barton? Ms. Suter?
Here.
Mr. Conti?
Here.
Dr. Gagliardi? Ms. Cusinelli? Mr. Panucci?
Here.
Ms. Cantillo?
Here.
Just for the sake of everyone who's here, Dr. Gagliardi is participating in this meeting through a conference call so that he wanted to be in attendance. And we did check with the Executive County Superintendent, who authorized the participation by conference call.
Mr. Edwards?
In accordance with Chapter 231 of Public Law 1975, entitled the Open Publics Meeting Act, adequate notice of this meeting was not provided due to the unforeseen necessity to deal with an emergency arising out of the criminal indictment of the district superintendent. Any delay for the purpose of providing adequate notice would likely result in substantial harm to the public, specifically the management of the district, and therefore emergency notice was given pursuant to NJSA 1049B3 at 5:09 p.m. September 29, 2015, by notifying the Asbury Park Press, the Star Ledger, and Brick Times of the time, date, location, and the agenda for this meeting, and by posting the written notice of this meeting on the Administration Office Bulletin Board, the official district website, and the Municipal Clerk's Office. The meeting will be limited to discussion of an action on the urgent matter.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Do I have a motion to adopt the doctrine of necessity?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Panucci.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Suter. Mr. Edwards?
Whereas the School Ethics Act, NJSA 18A-1221, was enacted by the New Jersey State Legislature to ensure and preserve public confidence in school board members and school administrators and to provide specific ethical standards to guide their conduct. And whereas questions arose regarding how a board should invoke the doctrine of necessity when a quorum of a Board of Education has conflicts of interest on a matter required to be voted upon. And whereas the School Ethics Commission provided guidance on the doctrine of necessity public advisory opinion A03-9, and whereas the opinion sets forth that when it is necessary for a board to invoke the doctrine of necessity, the board should state publicly that it is doing so, the reason that such action is necessary, and the specific nature of the conflicts of interest. And whereas the School Ethics Commission, by resolution dated February 25, 2003, clarified and required a Board of Education invoking the doctrine of necessity to adopt a resolution setting forth the board is invoking the doctrine, the reason for doing so, and the specific nature of the conflicts of interest. And whereas the School Ethics Commission further directed boards of education that invoke the doctrine to read the resolution of public meetings scheduled by the board, post or where post public notices for 30 days, and provide the commission with a copy. Whereas the State Department of Education promulgated NJAC 6A23A 6.2, which places additional standards and restrictions upon the ability of board member to vote on a particular issue. And whereas the Brick Township Board of Education desires to discuss and vote upon a resolution authorizing the suspension of the district superintendent without pay pending the disposition of the criminal charges set forth in an indictment handed up by the Ocean County Grand Jury on September 29, 2015, or until further action by the board pursuant to NJSA 18A 6.8.3, and whereas the board attorney has reviewed the state regulations and the advisory decisions of the commission and determined board member conflicts prohibit 5 board members of the board from voting on these matters, and whereas the 5 board members' conflicts are as follows: John Barton's wife is a teacher in the school district, and Mr. Barton is an NJEA member employed in another district. Michael Conti's wife is a teacher in the school district. Frank Panucci's sister is a teacher in the school district. Dr. Vito Gagliardi Sr.'s sister-in-law is a teacher aide in the school district. And Sharon Cantillo's niece is a teacher in the school district, which recently became known as a result of the School Ethics Commission issuance of Advisory Opinion A09-15 on July 28, 2015. Whereas the Brick Township Board of Education currently consists of 7 board members, and whereas the inability of the above 5 listed board members to vote on the above matters results in the lack of a quorum, whereas in order to vote on the above matters, the board desires to invoke the doctrine of necessity in accordance with the procedures established by the commission, Now therefore be resolved by the Brick Township Board of Education, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey as follows. As the 5 board members listed above are prohibited from voting on the matters set forth above, the board hereby invokes the doctrine of necessity in order to vote on a resolution suspending the district superintendent without pay effective September 29, 2015, pending the disposition of the criminal charges set forth in an indictment handed up by the Ocean County Grand Jury on September 29, 2015, or until further action by the board pursuant to NJSA 18A 6-8.3. This resolution shall be read at the September 30th, 2015 emergency meeting scheduled by the board and posted on the board's website for no less than 30 days. That a copy of this resolution shall be forwarded to the School Ethics Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. It would be,
Call for a vote.
we already voted on this, but we...
No, you
Take a roll call.
you haven't taken roll call. You had a motion and a second.
Okay. Mrs. Carey?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Sudar?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Dr. Gagliardi?
Yes.
Mr. Panucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cantillo?
Yes. Okay, Ms. Osborne, since it's a human resource, are you introducing the item, or Mr. Edwards? I'm not sure which one of you is introducing the item.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, would you like to do it?
The interim superintendent recommends item number 2 on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Do I have a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mrs. Sudar. Thank you, Mr. Conti. Do I have any board members with any comments on item number 2?
I just have a question for Mr. Sharadnik. Where on the last line it says, "or until further action by the board." What other action can the board take?
Well, we can talk about that as we move forward, but the bottom line is that the board has the right to go forward with charges, if they so desire, against the superintendent, or there may be also the board or the prosecutor's office could proceed with challenging, essentially seeking to have his certificate to continue serving revoked. But they both require hearings, and I think you have to keep in mind even with the prosecutor's release on this, it specifically states that these are charges, that still have to proceed through the judicial process for determination of guilt or innocence.
Right, but if the board wanted to proceed with trying to revoke his certification as superintendent, the board can do that?
Yeah, now that's beyond the scope of this meeting because we're limited for this
understand that.
purpose, but as we move forward, that the board wishes, we can, discuss what other options are open to you.
Can you send me some information about that?
Okay.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Any other board comment? Seeing none, do I have any comments from the public on item number 2? Mr. Finelli?
We're talking about item number 2, but we want to know what item number 2 is.
Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have...
Because it's special.
I'm sorry, Mr., oh, how about this, do you have some to distribute?
You want to just read it?
How about if we just, Mr. Edwards, would you like to read that too, since you're so good at reading all of these things?
Well, thank you. Item number 2 states the following: to ratify the suspension of the district superintendent without pay effective September 29, 2015, pending the disposition of the criminal charges set forth in the indictment handed up by the Ocean County Grand Jury on September 29, 2015, until further action by the board pursuant to NJSA 18A 6-8.3.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Yes, Mr. Finelli?
You going to have public comment at the end of the meeting like you normally do?
Yes. Okay, then that's a very good idea. At this point, Mrs. Carey?
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Sudar?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Dr. Gagliardi?
Yes.
Mr. Panucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cantillo?
Yes. At this point, I will open it up to public comment. If there's anyone
On this,
on, that's the only thing that's on the agenda, Mr. Finelli. If you'd like to come up to the microphone.
my comment is not on this, not on number 2.
Okay, that's the only thing that's on the agenda, Mr. Finelli.
I'll wait till the public comment.
This is public comment.
In general,
Right, but that's the only thing that's on the agenda.
so this is the only chance.
The
to
public,
comment.
the public comment is limited on the item that's on the agenda. Since it's an emergency meeting, we can only act and really talk about the action being taken here.
Seems to be a little confusion. Let's see if we can straighten it out.
So my question was before, you have board comments, human resources, which I guess is number 2, public comment, human resources, board comment period, and public comment period. Is there going to be a public comment period, or this is the only chance?
No, this would be the only chance on this item that's on the agenda. I think that this is just a carryover, I think, from the form of agenda. But this is a emergency meeting that's limited strictly to taking action that was taken here tonight, and since that's the only notice that was given, the comment has to be limited to that too tonight.
Okay, well, if my comment doesn't fit in, you can stop me. At one of the meetings that I went to in the past, I think in this room, there was a discussion about school board members speaking to the press. And the comments were, you shouldn't do it because you don't talk to the press and you don't represent the school board meeting. And if by chance you get roped into it, there should be a disclaimer that you're talking about as a public citizen and not as a school board member. Yet today, on this particular subject, in the Asbury Park Press, there's a quote from one of the school board members about this action, and even refers to "we" representing the school board, and I thought that was against the rules.
Mr. Finelli, it is my understanding that the superintendent is the spokesperson for the district. That's the way I've always understood it. That's what I follow. So, I can't control what other people do. Everybody should be following the policy. If the policy's changed, I know that whenever there's a legal issue, I always refer anyone with comments or questions to the board attorney.
Well, one of your school board members was quoted in today's paper.
I didn't read today's paper. I'm sorry. I don't know who was quoted or what was
Would
said.
you like to see it? I'll give it to you.
I'm sure that I could look at it later.
Well, is
Okay.
that a rule or is it not a rule?
It's my understanding that the policy is that the superintendent is the spokesperson for the district.
Okay, so somebody broke the rules.
Excuse me one second, Dr. Gagliardi. Mr. Finley, I didn't hear what you said.
Then the rules were broken.
Permission to speak.
Okay, Dr. Gagliardi, someone is already speaking. I will let you speak in 1 second.
Okay.
Well, now you know who I'm talking about.
Oh, all right, Mr. Finelli. Okay, Dr. Gagliardi, go ahead.
First of all, I want to apologize. I was not aware of the policy. I certainly will not do that again. I didn't mean to speak out of turn. I believe what I said, but if I wasn't supposed to say it, I retracted it because it was in the press.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gagliardi.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else with a question or a comment? Yes, ma'am. Could you please get up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Victoria Pacala. I live at 759 Manor Drive in Brick. I also read the paper today, and I've been following along in many different sources of news media about what were pending indictments and came to be today. And my specific question is, how is it that the school board hired a convicted drug smuggler into the Brick school system? I'd like to know why. I'd like to know specifically what kind of background check did you use? And how did Andrew Morgan slip through the cracks?
Well, that right now is still pending before the county prosecutor's office, and...
No, I'm talking about his history of drug conviction.
I'm not, my recommendation to the board member is not to comment on that. Let it be for the prosecutor to take the case forward and make the case.
Well, then I'd like to make some comments in that case, because I'm a teacher, and I know that everybody employed in any public school district in New Jersey goes through a criminal history review and background check. And I also know that we all, with prospective employees, do our due diligence. And I would like to know how, if you have reviewed other recent hires to ensure that there were no other convicted felons working in the Brick School District at this point.
Well, again,
Have they all passed criminal history review background checks?
Well, first of all, the question is beyond the scope of what we're here to talk about tonight at this emergency meeting. But the district does comply with obtaining criminal background checks and clearances on all employees in the district.
I'd like it to be noted that anybody, any child, any adult, any responsible administrator or board member has access to Google. And on Google, you can type in Andrew Morgan teacher, and the second hit is from a small newspaper out of state, the New York Times. It has a 1989 article referring to the conviction of Andrew Morgan, and yet I question this board's responsibility and due diligence in that hire. And again, I repeat my concern that there are no other convicted felons working for the school children in Brick at this time. I would like some kind of response, please.
Again, I'm just going to tell you that every employee of the district goes through that background check and is not hired unless the background check comes through and is cleared by the state.
And that Andrew Morgan was hired under that same process?
Yes, yes.
Did the New Jersey Criminal History Review Board not do its job?
They approved him to work in the district, and he had worked in other districts before he came here.
I understand that, but in 1989, the New York Times reported his conviction as a drug smuggler.
You can characterize that. All I'm telling you is your question about whether or not whether the district obtained a criminal background check. Yes, they did, and was it cleared by the state? The answer is yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Mrs. Call, how are you?
Good evening, Nan Call, 18 Greenbrier Boulevard, and as they would say in Washington, I rise for a point of order. I don't believe that that is the matter being discussed now. It also hasn't been noticed in any way. I do fully believe that after you settle the business on your agenda for the night, it would be appropriate to allow people to make some comments within reason. I don't think it's appropriate for them to ask questions and you to answer them when the people that they're discussing aren't here, and many of us, and when I saw the date on the paper handed out, it was 1989. My God, I thought that we were in the rehabilitation habit, and until you can have a full discussion, just let them make their comments. Don't you comment on it, is my advice.
Thank you, Mrs. Call. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Yes, Mrs. Murray.
Hi, how are you? Melinda Murray, 1622 Forge Pond Road. Are we able, if Mr. Yazinski is found guilty, can we go after him for the money we have paid him already? I mean, I know you talked about his certificate, but can we go after the money that we paid him already? Because, I mean, we lost a lot on Morgan, we lost a lot on the other Morgan, now we're going to lose on him. We've been paying him all along. Can we go and sue him and get our money back, put a lien on him or something?
We will be reviewing the options with the board at a future meeting. Right now, we're limited to taking this action, which we felt had to be taken quickly and in an emergency.
Okay.
And again, you have charges that are pending that still have to go through the judicial process for a determination of guilt or innocence for the individuals that were indicted.
Right. Well, food for thought, I'd like to see us get our money back. Thanks.
Just state your name and address for the
Victor
record.
Fenimore, 137 Queen Anne Road, Brook, New Jersey. Unfortunately, it's another incident that happened with the township, and I apologize that happened to happen to Dr. Uzinski and other members too, but things do happen. One of the other questions that did come up, and that was one that I did answer. If we go forward with the indictment, if it does go through and he is found guilty, there's suspension without pay, obviously. But what about health care benefits, lifetime benefits, pension planning? Is that going to be all brought to a halt? Is that part of a contract? Is that going to be negotiated later? Because a crime, this is a pinnacle moment to where we got to make an example. Enough is enough. This is for the taxpayer, for the students, this is for people, the township, right across the board. And this is the pinnacle moment to make these changes going forward, not the past where we keep paying and monies are being paid out. It has to stop. And this is a point where we have to make it stop now.
All right, well, I'm just being told Dr. Uzinski doesn't receive health benefits, but, I mean, the bottom line is the prosecutor will be handling the matter initially, and depending on what happens there, whether it's resolved or whether it goes to trial, the board will be there as a victim to assert claims for restitution or recoupment of benefits.
And I'm going to bring that because I have not yet had a chance to see the new contract. That's why I was looking into that. But still, I know in some scenarios, things are paid out afterwards. And again, unfortunately, it happened to a person. There's a lot of gray matter to it, but there's a point where we have to make at this point going forward. And it has to be an example set. It's not just for him, but for other members and anyone across the board.
Thank you for
All
your
right, thank you.
comment. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment? Mr. Scott?
George Scott, 16 Queen Anne Road. I have a question. You're ratifying the suspension. I thought that he was already suspended, but with pay, pending the indictment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So now that he's indicted, you're going to suspend his pay, which is logical, and we're going to move forward with that. But the question lies with NJS 18A. Couldn't you have done this at the next regular meeting, just made it retroactive that he didn't get paid from the day of indictment? I mean, we have people sitting here that are getting paid. We're paying you as taxpayers, so why couldn't we do this in a more efficient way?
Well, do you want to answer?
Well, what I'm going to tell you is I believe that this has been an issue that has been going on and going on and going on. I think that the general consensus from the public, the outcry of Dr. Uzinski being paid has been heard loud and clear, and
Inclusive of me, and I understand that.
right. And
I still want an answer to my question. Could it have been done without spending more money, that you could have just said, as of the date of the indictment, he doesn't get paid, which is retroactive to that date, and you could have did it at your next meeting, which I think is October 22nd. Why
I guess we
Why
could,
couldn't we
but
do that?
Mr.
Well,
Stradnick, you...
part of the issue is, rather than get into an argument over when the suspension without pay takes effect, if you postpone it for a week or two until you get to your regular meeting, can you make the suspension retroactive? I mean, the bottom line is that from the standpoint of, I think the feelings from the board was that they wanted to act quickly to correct and take the action that they could take on the indictment without getting into a delay in the meeting for any period of time. That it was more important to take action quickly than put it off for a week or 2 weeks or to your next meeting.
But it could have been, is what you're saying.
I'm not prepared to answer that from a legal opinion as in terms of the, if you waited until that date, whether or not you could effectively.
You're the attorney for the board. Who else would we get that answer from?
Well, Jack, wouldn't we, I mean, there's a financial issue involved here, though,
Right.
too, that if you waited until the 22nd of October to impose the without pay part, there'd be another pay involved that he would have
Well,
received.
that's what I'm asking. Did the
So
law
doing
say,
it
I
today-
thought we were waiting for whether or not an indictment was going to come down. The indictment came down. I thought from past history, that's when his pay was going to stop automatically.
Well, no, the way it was approved with pay, suspension with pay. It wasn't approved suspension with pay and then without pay once indicted. That's not the way the
You
resolution
don't have any
read.
caveat
No,
like
it was
that.
not read that way. So that's the purpose of the meeting. It's my understanding was to impose the suspension without pay, because if you waited till October 22nd, there'd be another pay involved.
And it's not self-executing. It's not that when the indictment comes down, automatically it changes. The board would have to take an action to make it from a suspension with pay, which is the only thing they could do before an indictment. The indictment came down at it now. The board, quite frankly, had the discretion, to do it, to whether or not to change it without pay. As you saw, it was unanimous. Everybody voted that the suspension should be without pay. But it needed the board action. It's not a self-executing statute, like it would automatically convert from with pay to without pay upon the indictment.
Okay. Further comment, if I might. Never seen anybody not be in attendance and actually taking part of the meeting. You had said that you had checked with the county superintendent of schools, so who made that decision? He did, or, I mean, there's another member missing. Was the same thing afforded to the other missing member?
I don't believe so. I don't know whether she had requested it or not, Mr. Scott. I did not know that this was going to take place until I got here, and I was told by Mr. Sradnick that it was cleared by the county superintendent, so that's why it's being allowed.
Okay.
I don't know that Mrs. Cusinelli had that knew that she had the option to do this.
Okay. All right, so my question is, again, we're moving on. He calls up, I guess, the board attorney to find out. And
Well,
my question is to avoid additional, monies being spent. You go on the clock, you get paid. So did this board member go to the president of the board? You're saying no.
No,
from
I
what you
didn't know
just
until
said.
I got here.
I don't understand that.
The board member came to the board secretary, which is the appropriate avenue. As the board secretary, I researched it and found that there is Open Public Meeting Act case law that allows members to participate via conference call.
Okay.
So I notified the superintendent and the board attorney that he had made this request.
And then it went up the chain?
I guess that's when it went to the
I
county
contacted the
superintendent.
county superintendent to see if that's true. And he confirmed that yes, there is precedence for that.
That's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that were involved at high-paying salaries just to get a guy on the phone. Thanks.
Is there any, Mr. Kutan? I'd like everyone who wants to speak first to be able to speak, and then a second time if you, okay?
Joe Kutan, 241 Arizona Drive. I am so confused about this whole thing, number one. I always thought, maybe you could help me, Jack, when a grand jury indicts somebody, there is only the prosecutor there, 12 jurors, and the judge. They don't allow anybody else. They don't allow the defense, lawyer, or anybody else. And they try to present that case to make it look like it's worth going to trial. Then that's when he's indicted. But he's still not guilty, is what I'm saying, until the trial is done. Now, I think we're leaving ourselves open because if the man goes to trial and proves he is innocent, okay, which everybody thinks he's guilty, but if he does prove he's innocent, okay, the board is going to get sued right on down the line. It's going to cost us a fortune. So, I mean, the only thing I'm trying to say is be careful of how you're really going to handle this. Because I'm sure as heck, I don't want to pay no more tax dollars. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Cotan. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Talty?
John Talty, Forge Pond Road. My comments deal with the theory in this country that you're innocent until you're proven guilty. I have a grandson who's over in Iraq right now defending your rights to freedom of speech. And with freedom of speech, and you're about to exhibit that tonight, goes responsibility. In the last 5 months, we've had 2 individuals in this town who've been accused or alleged to have committed crimes. Dr. Uzinski and another person who was running for a political office. I believe, in my judgment, that both of these individuals are innocent until you have proven them guilty. As of right now, in my judgment, Dr. Uzinski is not guilty, and the other individual, who I will not name his name, who's running with 2 of the board members here for the council, that he is also innocent until he had his chance in court. And I think we're rushing it right now. I can sense the wolves ready to just pounce, and it's really sad.
Thank you for your comment. Mrs. Call?
And Carl again. And I wholeheartedly agree with the fact that these people, many others, they are innocent until they're proven guilty in a court of law. But I do know, even in private business, until you've been indicted, you frequently might be suspended with pay, but with an indictment frequently comes the decision that from that point until the court trial takes place, it's without pay. I respect that Mr. Scott is always very, very diligent about watching the monies we pay. However, I'm not too sure that it's not a wash. This was done under a doctrine of necessity, and there were many factors to it, including the length of time that might take place, the people who have been urging for similar situation, and knowing school board meetings are always very, very long. So if you wait till the next regular school board meeting or even a workshop meeting and then go into formal during the workshop, you're still going to be paying the money for the people who get paid, which is definitely, to my understanding, not any of the board members. So there are some people that may be the attorney, possibly. I don't know the deal with his contract. I don't know some of this Board of Ed employees. But I think that the people in Brick Township concur with the idea of the doctrine of necessity being invoked, holding the special meeting, because we went through this exercise months ago when Mr. Talty had his situation and people did not want to respect that he could just withdraw his resignation. It took a long time to choose what we were going to do there. By that I mean for people to vote. So I do think it was the right thing to do, and I think that the matter to be resolved has nothing to do with what I read 1989. It has to do with one question. At this moment, will you vote, yay or nay, to change it to suspended without pay? And I would leave it to my honored colleague, Mr. Saradnik, to say whether there is anything. I think it's legal. I don't think that the person can then go to court and sue you for not giving him his pay, but you may have to give the pay retroactively, and that's a wash. Either give it, if he's found without any guilt, then you give it then, or you give it now. I don't see, and I leave it to Mr. Saradnik.
Thank you, Mrs. Call. Mr. Finelli.
Is that suspension without pay and benefits?
I think Dr. Caldez said that Dr. Yuzinski does not take benefits from the district.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I've probably been to as many school boards as all of you except Mr. Edwards, and I've never seen a teleconferencing going on. And I'm not sure that you said that Mrs. Cusinelli was not offered the same option of doing that?
All I'm saying is that she's not here, and there's no phone set up for her, so I don't think that she called in or knew to ask Mr. Edwards. I've never seen it done before, so I don't know. That's what I said. I don't know if she was afforded the same opportunity, because I don't know if she knew to ask.
Okay, what's wrong with this picture, right? Based on what you said before, the person who approved this is also the one who picked him to sit on this school board, correct? What's wrong with that picture?
I don't know that...
You want to talk about preferential treatment?
I don't know that he approved it.
Well, somebody before said it was approved by the county superintendent 3 times, Mr. Edwards.
That was misinterpreted. He did not approve it.
It was permissible.
It's not something that would go to the county superintendent to approve. It was, the question to him was, is it permissible? And there is case law that substantiates that it is.
Well, I heard it more than once that the county superintendent approved
I
it.
think the word approved was misused.
All right, well, let me ask flat out. I mean, was the county superintendent involved in this decision, or wasn't he?
I can't answer that.
It wasn't a decision, it was a question whether it was permissible after Dr. Gagliardi approached the board secretary. He had the knowledge that it, based on his experience, that it was, and we called the county superintendent to find out, is it in fact permissible? And the county superintendent said, yes, there is precedent for it.
Okay, so...
Under the Open Records Act.
And did I also hear you say you approved it?
No, I didn't prove it. No one approved it. We just wanted to find out if it was
Okay.
allowable.
So that the source for this allowing, saying there is a precedent, was the person who assigned him to the school board in the first place. So that certainly is the shades of gray in my mind, and somebody might want to follow up on that to see if there is a precedent for that, because if it looks like fish and it smells like fish, it's probably
I
fish.
think I said that already. I did the research first and found that it is permissible. I let Dr. Caldez
Okay,
know
wait,
that, and Dr. Caldez, all he did was double check with the county superintendent that it is permissible, and he said, yes, it is permissible.
Where did you research that?
Open Public Meetings Act.
And in there it says you can do it in...
There is case law in there that talks about where there's been challenges where board members, especially in the Pinelands Commission is the case, where someone challenged whether or not they could participate via conference call. And the answer that came back was yes.
Okay.
So there is-
Did you offer that option to Mrs. Cusinelli?
He did not ask whether...
Did you offer that option to
The answer
Mrs.
is
Cusinelli?
No, I did not offer
Okay.
the option to Dr. Gagliardi either.
Would
I
you-
didn't. I don't offer that options. If they don't call me and tell me that they're not coming, I don't know that they're not coming. I don't keep their personal calendars, Mr. Finelli.
Okay.
So I had no idea that Mrs. Cusinelli was not going to be here this evening.
Oh.
She did not call and tell me that she wasn't going to be here and ask for a conference call attendance. Dr. Gagliardi did call me and say, I'm not able to make the meeting. Can I participate via conference call?
Okay, well, I've said this
difference?
before and I'll say it again.
So
You
you're
people
trying to
have,
make something out
you
of
have a
that's not really there.
You people have a communication problem, because when the board president sits up there and doesn't know what's going on at her own meeting, you got a communication problem, and I think that needs to be fixed. She certainly should be aware of what's going on before she walks in the room here, and I think if, in fact, one school board member knows that they can teleconference, all school board members should know that. Plain and simple,
Thank you for your comment.
all right?
Thank you, Mr.
And my next question is, how many school board meetings do you miss before you can remove somebody from the school board?
I believe the policy is
I
three.
think three unexcused absences.
For regular scheduled.
Yeah, for regular scheduled meetings.
Does this count as one?
Two consecutive. No, this would not count as he's present at the meeting. He's here via conference call.
And it's
Plus,
But
it's
I
not
don't know
a
why you don't
regular-
understand that.
It's 2 consecutive
Okay.
regular meetings.
It doesn't seem like you're getting that one.
This has never happened before, and it happened now, and different things are being said, so nobody really knows what's going on except you.
I think it was explained quite clearly that he's here via conference call.
It was stated before quite unclearly that the county superintendent approved it. That's why I'm up here asking the question. That was very clear to me that was said. There's nothing wrong with my hearing.
Okay.
All right? And I think you have a communication problem because the board president doesn't know what's going on at her own meeting. That's very clear to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Just for the record, I'm Victoria Pacala again, 759 Manor. I'm so glad Mr. Scott brought up 18A because someone speaking prior, I can't really see, Shardik? Sharadnik before said that it was the board's discretion to put the superintendent out with paid suspension. And it's very clear in 18A that if the superintendent acts in a way that is inefficient, incapable, or conduct unbecoming a superintendent or other just cause, then the board can certainly suspend him without pay and do a tenure hearing, and they have all kinds of options to not pay him all those thousands of dollars that have been paid these last 5 months.
Now, under the statute you're reading, what would happen, you would have to go through that process before you could suspend without pay.
So the board would have had to gone through that process, so they did have an option.
I'm not saying that, because right now, all of the information is down at the prosecutor's office.
Right, but I mean, despite a criminal investigation, we're all governed by a code in our public school system. And our code says, for instance, the special ed code says there is a particular way to identify and determine eligibility for special services. Now, without a paper trail that shows that this is what had happened for the child in question, well, then we can say that this is conduct in violation of the code, unbecoming of a superintendent. And you could have begun that process the day after you heard of the investigation and he needed to be suspended.
I disagree with you, but I'm not going to get into a legal debate with you here at a public meeting.
Okay, I would like the truth to be known by you or by me that taxpayers could have relied on the board to be more responsible and cut off the benefits, not the benefits, but the salary being paid to superintendent. That's all.
Is there anyone else with a public comment? Mr. Scott?
I'm George Scott. I'm okay with how the vote's going to go, but you've opened the door, in my opinion, to a board member being here on a phone, which was never done before. The secretary, Colden, business administrator, said that, he had looked this up. For the same board member, whose responsibility is it to make sure that his financial disclosure was correct? The same person that looked for the research as far as this is concerned?
I'm not following your question.
Okay, my question, I wish that board member were here, because I was going to wait to the next meeting. But on his financial disclosure statement, which is required,
Well, let me say, again, we're here for a special or emergency meeting on a specific topic. What I would do is, if you wait to the next meeting, you'll have the ability to raise that issues, and perhaps Mr. Gagliardi will be here.
okay? But you're affording him the opportunity evidently to vote, though, before it's even one way or another, what was right or wrong.
Scott, the vote's already been taken. They voted already. I don't know what you're saying. I just want to make sure that's clear. I don't know.
No, and I said I was okay with that. It was just, the format of how this meeting was done is just quite different than
The way you were
before.
speaking, it
No,
sounded
no,
like you
no.
were-
That part I
there was a
understood.
vote. They already voted.
No, I understood that. Okay, I'll bring it up at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I have one date of October the 22nd for our next regular meeting, 7 o'clock at Brick Township High School. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Panucci.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Conti.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Ms. Sudar?
Yes.
Mr. Conti?
Yes.
Dr. Gagliardi? Mr. Panucci?
Yes.
Ms. Cantillo?
Yes.